today. Thank you all for coming. The recording will be available afterward as well, and we'll make the slide deck available too. So official start right here. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kyle Paterson. I'm from Part-Time CFO Services, and I'm joined here with Erik from Yeeboo Digital. Erik will sort of introduce himself in a little bit. I'm going to first start with providing some background about who Part-Time CFO Services is, just because, how did you get to this webinar if you don't know who we are? And who are we? And then just provide some context as well into the environment we are in from a giving perspective. So let me just share my screen. Just confirming, I think that is now visible. All right, so Perspective is our not-for-profit operating arm. We actually started out as a part-time CFO service company, and we've grown to expand that. And now about half our client base is the not-for-profit sector, and we now specialize in delivering finance, leadership, and accounting services in that area. And just so you can see a bit about us, we're really big about being part of the community, and we put a lot of emphasis and effort into creating a workplace that our team loves, which is important to our clients too, because our staff actually come on site and become part of your culture as well. So it's good for having staff who enjoy working here. We serve a pretty broad variety of not-for-profit clients and charity sector clients across the province, primarily in Ontario, but we have clients in other parts of Canada as well. Budget ranging from anywhere from 1 to 40 million. There's exceptions on both sides, and there just needs to be complexity inside of that space. And the not-for-profit world now has considerable and increasing complexity, both from a reporting perspective and just from a financial management perspective as well. For those who have not heard of either Part-Time CFO Services or Perspective, probably it's because of where we started out in our roots. So we are also, which I think is kind of a lot of the individuals who registered and signed up. We're also sort of a suburban rural roots organization starting in the Northumberland region and up through Peterborough, the Kawarthas zone. And we've expanded out, and we have team members now across the province and in some other places in Canada as well. And what really sets us apart is we do offer the complete accounting department solution at a fractional basis. So there's a lot of different reasons why clients bring us in, and these are some of the primary reasons. The one at the bottom there, maternity leaves or other types of leaves, and involuntary or voluntary turnover, we do bridges quite a bit, but there's also just structural ones where we come in and provide our services on that front. And we really aim to not just be considered like we're not a consultancy. We're really part of your organization and part of your team, and we get in, deliver with you and the team. And then finally, most likely your organization has a capable, competent finance team in place today, probably highly loyal. And so we developed an assessment tool where we can take our best practices across these different organizations we serve and bring it to your organization, just to give you an outside perspective on if you are being effective and efficient as possible, and opportunities for improvement, and we can help sort of implement those changes as well. Thank you very much on that front. Now I'm just going to provide some context or frame to think about this conversation through. Most of the data that I'm going to share is from the Giving Report, which comes from Canada Helps each year. This came out, so it's a 2023 data, and I'm assuming some of the trends are probably similar, considering that the economic environment and the uncertainty hasn't really adjusted too much. If anything, there's more of a slowdown in the economy happening. So I would imagine some of these trends are looking to continue. And at a really high level, what Canada Helps has noticed is that there has been quite a decline in the number of people claiming donations, and then the actual number of people making donations. That's in the face, though, of the population increasing 27%. So I want to keep that in check, too, because the number of donators actually increased, but it's likely more people are requiring your services as well. So the counterbalance there is weighing against that. But what's neat is that the average donation is going up per person. So we're seeing a higher concentration of donors and them actually donating more. So we're still seeing total donations on the incline. And you can see here, like I said, it went up, but it was pretty flat, the number of donors over 2022 to 2023. But over the decade, the number is up. And then the total value donations, again, this is just through Canada Help, so you would all have your own individual data front here, has stayed relatively flat year over year. Some of the bright spots is online giving is still up. So online giving is still a highly important area to focus in on. Gifts of security, stocks, bonds, and mutual funds increased 32% year over year. Small number, but it is seeing a big increase. The next one, though, I think is really important to touch on is the monthly recurring donations. The total is increasing 11% year over year. So that is an uptrend cycle here. And then suburban or rural areas are seeing the biggest growth in year over year donations, where urban areas had the most significant decline. And the two big obstacles that you would find in this report is the one is just the economic and financial constraints. And then the second one is the sense of community and connectedness. Depending on where your organization is, you might already be experiencing this. But as we become sort of a digital community, people will have more sort of a social network online, and they're not necessarily as connected to the community as they used to be. So what can we do from that on a digital marketing front to bring people back into the local roots? Apologize for my highlighting, but I just see these as opportunities, and I was just using the highlighting tool on my computer here. But these are reasons why people stop giving. They doubt the effectiveness of their gifts. They're not actually being asked or prompted to donate again, or they dislike how they were being approached for more donations. Yeah, I think if you follow any of the U.S. election and you've seen the donation emails coming from there, I think that would highlight a good case study of what not to write to donors. And then just in general, though, about half of past donors flag issues beyond finances. So it's not just economic constraints that are actually ceasing their giving into the future, which are these higher level issues. I do see an opportunity here. I highlighted, again, we are sort of financial minded, but we are about to experience the biggest wealth transfer in the history of Canada. And I'd also suggest that's probably a risk because the higher end from the age bracket are the ones who are making the larger donations today. So how do you actually capture a part of this wealth transfer to the next generation? And then finally, some of the takeaways. So cultivate community. Can digital strategy help on that front? Can communicate what impact you're making more clearly? Can you highlight non-monetary ways to support that also provide value to the organization? How can you make it personal? And how can you encourage proactivity? Because in most cases, people are highly generous during a crisis, but how do you focus on sort of the long-term work your organization is up to? And with that, I'm going to introduce Erik here from Yeeboo. And Erik's actually, over his history, worked always primarily in the not-for-profit sector in a variety of different ways, but it really drove his passion for communication, fundraising, technology, and marketing. And he started UBU Digital about just over 10 years ago and worked in every sort of piece of that digital marketing front. Now over 10 years old in business, it serves quite a range of amazing clients. But I think, when I was talking to Erik earlier, I think his being a proud father, and then I discovered he's also a drummer, and I'm guessing a good drummer. So if there's time at the end, maybe we can get something. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Erik to lead us through this conversation.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that, Kyle. So I know in kind of speaking with Kyle leading up to this conversation, I think we've got a range of organizations that are kind of joining in. Before I dive in, I'd be curious, just maybe in the chat, for organizations to list one thing that they see as a challenge. And if we can, I'll try to address this as we go through, in and around fundraising, in and around technology, but maybe one thing that you think of, as a challenge for your organization. I'll pull this up and I'll give you a little bit about who we are and what we do. And just for confirmation, Kyle, am I going to see that in the chat, or is that going to come up somewhere else?
It's I'll be watching. It should come up in the chat.
Okay.
Here, but awesome. If you start talking, I'll start flagging things when they come.
Perfect. Through. Thank you. All right. You see my slide?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So this is a pretty broad topic. Digital innovation. It's pretty fuzzy. But it is really incredibly powerful when we start to think about what we can do here. And I think a lot of organizations, when they think about innovation, they think it has to be something really big. And I will say that after almost 20 years of being in the space, most of the really impactful things are not the big things. They're the little things. They're the little things that you do to make operations flow better, to increase stewardship, to maintain donor awareness of your organization. It's not necessarily the massive database migrations or the huge new websites or all the things that you might think of when you think of digital innovation.
There has been a few coming through. If you wanted to deviate whenever you'd like to, it's in the chat. I can always jump in, but it's there for you.
That's great. Thank you. So quickly about us. So we're a 20-person digital fundraising and technology agency. We're decentralized across Canada, and we work across North America. Our clients cover a wide range of organizations and services, but our mission is to try to change the world. But as a bunch of technologists and marketers, we're not really in the position to do that. So we do that through the transformative work of our clients. Our goal is to make as many of our clients successful with the tools and the strategies as we can, because we value the work that they're doing. We do that in 4 kind of key ways. So tech projects, digital marketing and fundraising, ongoing support, and then digital strategy. And just to give you a quick snapshot of the type of organizations we're working with, covers a pretty wide range in the course of a given week. So digital innovation. I see a few things coming through here. Brian says, avoiding duplication of requests by different branches. Okay, so that's interesting. So something very specific to how that organization is working. Brian, I'd be curious to know a little bit more about your organization and what you sort of mean by duplication there. But certainly we think around how technology can help us. And that's often around things like business processes. So when you pull up something like a standard definition of digital innovation, and it's like leveraging technologies to enhance your products, business models, your services, blah blah blah. All that to say that really what we're looking for here is we're looking for things that aren't as efficient as they could be, and for a way for technology to make your life better, not worse. Brian with SCOTUS Canada. Okay. Oh, Scouts Canada. Got it. So Scouts Canada. Okay. So different requests coming in from different branches. Okay. That's super helpful. Thank you. So as we think about the work that gets done over the course of any given week within an organization, especially around communications, around fundraising, around like how the organization might operationalize things. There are so many opportunities to look for little ways to improve the overall effectiveness of the organization. One thing that you hear time and time again, every conference, every webinar, every conversation I have with an organization is usually something around the lines of, we've got a lot we want to be doing. We don't have enough people to do it. The people we do have are pretty stretched thin. We're suffering from the kind of high turnover rate within the sector in general. And we lack some of the internal expertise we feel to kind of get those things done, especially when it comes around to technology and innovation. And that's real. That's really where a lot of organizations are. And organizations like what we do, and certainly what like Kyle and their group do, is here to sort of help organizations move past those pieces, because where I find a lot of organizations get stuck is in consistency of implementation. A lot of organizations look at creating a system that is focused on whatever the person in the role is capable of doing. And because we have such high turnover in our space often, it means that when that person rotates out and the next person joins, the organization often takes a big step back from what they were trying to accomplish. Things can be reset, things can be reframed. And what I would love to start pushing in our sector and for people to start thinking about is, how do we develop systems that can continue to function in absence of the person who is in the seat right now? And that sounds maybe a little bit lofty, but it's definitely something that I see over kind of our work from working across so many different organizations. So this is where I think digital innovation can be really beneficial to organizations, especially when we're thinking about fundraising, when we're thinking about digital communications, because we're able to implement tools And these tools have automations. They have programs and routines that we can set up within them. So we can basically configure a base level of communication, a base level of stewardship, a guarantee that certain things are going to happen, and that it won't be that's what I'm looking for here, contingent on whether or not there's, that person who was there last week is here this week. And so that's when we think about digital innovation, that's something that I do want you to kind of think about, right? How do we implement systems, not just processes that are reliant on the people specifically within that role. Looking at something from Aaron here, streamlining databases, lack of databases across organizational functions, fundraising programs. I mean, that's a really good one, Aaron, because one of the things that I think organizations, and maybe we just don't think about this in this way, but data is pretty much the thing that connects our organizations, right? Like in a decentralized company like ours, it's not the water cooler. It's not the it's data. It's literally our work together is data. I'm either creating data that someone else is going to engage with, or I'm working with data that someone else has created. And if your organization has processes where your data gets, for lack of better words, dirty, or isn't consistent, you can really make working more difficult, right? So if you think about what we're doing with digital innovation, certainly we're thinking bigger about systems, but we're also trying to think about, how do we make the data that we pass between each other, whether that's you to someone else in the organization, you into the database, you out to the donor, how do we make that data just more efficient? How do we make it, streamlined? How do we make it consistent? I think I was at an event last week in Montreal, a tech provider, and they asked everybody, how many people use this product? And everybody in the room used the product. And they said, how many people produce their financial reports directly out of that product? 2 people out of the entire room. That means that although the system is designed and completely capable of producing the reports that everyone needs, the process right now means that 98% of people in the room aren't able to just go, hey, there's the report I need. They have to pull the data down, massage it, grab some data from somewhere else, take the stuff off the Post-it note and hammer that in. Although we have the tools, we have the processes, what we end up with is this kind of, almost thing, right? This sort of little Frankenstein version of what we could be doing. And so I think that's really a very important point that Aaron brings up, is just like, how do we think around data? How do we as an organization, fix this? And that's not an easy task, but it is something that, with organizational will can absolutely be done.
Just a quick follow-up to that question.
Yeah,
from a first step perspective here, or maybe it's a third step, because I would imagine a lot of not-for-profit organizations or charities, depending on their size, would have maybe the structured way that there would be program managers and different hats around that front, and they'd be potentially at different places, collecting different email addresses, collecting different people, and putting them in maybe a centralized CRM, maybe not, but having these data collection points. And then maybe they have like a social media person doing outbound pushing, but there's maybe not like this area where they're maybe collecting and then sorting the types of people they would want to be continually reaching out to. So even before you started, email campaign, which somebody else is asking, how do you keep it fresh? Who are you actually going to be sending those emails to, and how are you sort of sorting those people? So how would you go from, like, I don't know if it's 0 to 1 or 1 to 2 or something? Like, what would be your sort of suggestion on that front?
Yeah, it really does depend kind of where the organization is and what, where in that sort of sophistication or technical maturity they are. But certainly, and there's a pretty good segue there, Kyle. One of the things that's really important is, if you can, lean on tools. There is, I don't even know if I could put a number to the number of tools, technology platforms and tools focused on the nonprofit sector now. When I started in the space 20 years ago, I could count them on one hand. And now there are, every week I'm meeting a new organization who's developing a piece of software or a tool set or, an engagement product specifically for the sector, which is exciting, but it also means that perhaps it's maybe more confusing than it's ever been, to know what's the right fit for you as an organization. So certainly, this is something we do with a lot of organizations. We do try to, if you feel like you lack the technical expertise to figure out what that first step is, it's something a process we'll often go through with organizations, where we'll sit down with them and actually audit, what do you need? Because I think that's the thing I think that will help you decide what your strategy should be, is figure out where your pain points are, figure out, do you already have tools in place? If so, are they working well for you? And from there, you can figure out what are the steps you need to take in terms of, kind of moving along that line, towards sort of more operational efficiency, if you will.
Great. If you're open to a follow-up from there, just because it sort of popped up here, is because I get you're going through now sort of tech options here, or software options, but there's also like a feeling or desire that there's a human follow-up at some point through this chain. And I guess how do you then leverage sort of the technology or software to actually ensure that there's still the human element piece inside of this process?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think when we got this plethora of tools and the ability for personalization, what we did with it was we said, "Dear first name," and then we just blasted everybody with the exact same content. What matters with personalization is that you make it feel personal, right? We took our broad marketing concepts, our sort of spray and pray tactics, and we just applied them to what is essentially a very much a personal medium. I think originally, when digital kind of hit the stage, a lot of people thought of it as a one-to-many, right? The organization has this sort of, the ability to reach out into the internet and just touch anybody, right? But at the same time, it's actually one of the most personal mediums we have. Take someone's phone away from them and watch how squirrely they get in about 10 minutes. Your connection, your physical connection to digital is actually way stronger than you think. And we have the ability to learn about our donors, to learn about our leads, to learn about our constituents, and to apply that strategically in a way that does feel personal. And I'm not saying here that we don't want to still have personal, but the reality is, when your organization has 500 donors, you're getting one every couple of days or one every couple of day. You could conceivably call them, thank them, say, "Hey, awesome, thanks for the $50. That's super helpful." Add 2 years to that, add a little bit of notoriety. Maybe Oprah makes a mention of you, and the next thing you've got 50,000 donors. You cannot call them all. So you have to figure out, how do we take technology and have it help us create a personal experience? And we do that essentially through segmentation and personalization, right? So stuff about me. I've made a transaction, where I live, what I donated on, a lot of things about me. You could know whether I donated through an iPhone. Again, tells you a few things about me. So it's easy to create segments of people, donor segments within these systems. That's kind of what they're designed for. But also, you can create a personal communication stream with me. Marketing automation, I think there's a big hype about AI, and you only have to see me on LinkedIn to know I'm guilty of it as well. There's a ton of potential in AI. But I actually think before AI, or in concert with it, is marketing, is automations. There are so many things that I see organizations doing manually. And that can be just issuing tax receipts. I mean, it sounds silly, but there are a lot of organizations that still are manually issuing tax receipts. Get yourself a system that does an automated tax receipt. I mean, some of them used to be expensive. Many of them now are pay to play. You don't need a 3-year contract. I think of something like a Fundraise Up, as an example, is a very modern, mobile-friendly giving platform, and it's all it's all baked into the cost of the donation, right? So you're not paying up front for technology you don't know that you're going to need. You're basically paying for it as you're using it, which is a much better model, I think, for organizations to a certain point. And then as the organizations get larger, you have to kind of rethink that model. But certainly, anything that helps automate a process. I've worked with a lot of organizations on marketing, email marketing over the course of the years. And the first thing that gets dropped from an email marketing program when deadlines start to bottleneck is stewardship. Stewardship is always the first thing to drop, right? Because we can't drop the appeals. We need those. So stewardship is always the first thing to drop. So my argument is that you should always have a base level of stewardship baked into your marketing automations. If you're using, whether you're using a MailChimp or Feather or Salesforce Marketing Cloud, there are functions and tools within those that will help you set up a base level of stewardship. And it doesn't, that your organization is doing good stuff on the regular. Certainly you can drop those, emails as you do good stuff. But also I think there's a lot of great stuff that's probably evergreen that your organization has done that new people aren't going to know yet. And so you can set this base level of stewardship as part of, the onboarding, as part of, hey, I've made a donation. Here's 10 things you want me to know by the end of the year. Am I going to read every email? Probably not. But that's just the reality of email these days. But am I going to read some of them? Maybe. If your timing is good, if your subject lines are good, if you're able to kind of lure me in and engage with me, I've given to you. I've financially parted with money to your organization. I'm about as ready to talk about it as I'll ever be. So don't leave it for 3 months and then send me an email. Send me something the next day. Send me something 2 days after that, 2 days after that, 2 days after that. Get on it early. I think there used to be for lack of better words, I'm not even sure what the word is here, but organizations just did this. There's a better way of wording that. But everybody did a 1 week welcome series. So they would send one email the first week, one email the second week, one email the week after that, one email the week after that. So, spread 6 emails out over 6 weeks. That probably worked in 1999, 2000. The volume of emails now is unreal. Like if you send me one email a week, unless I am programmed to expect that email once a week, it is lost in the shuffle of email. Email is a very high volume game now. So you really have to think about, how am I going to break through and connect with the donor? Well, that's by hitting them with some nice base stewardship, things telling them about the impact of the organization. They want to know, and we'll get to this, but they want to know how their desire to change the world is being implemented, right? They can't be out doing the work. You're the facilitator of that work. So you have to report back. You have to steward. You have to tell them what's happening because that's how you keep a donor, right? Like if we think about it, excuse me, I'm drying out here. Too much talking. Your donor is also someone else's donor. And if they do a better job of stewardship than you do, their heart is going to swing towards that organization because they're going to feel like they're going to have more impact over there. I had a friend, actually one of the fellows that works with us, donated at his wedding to an organization a hefty sum. It's part of their it's part of their wedding process, and they didn't even hear back from the organization. Massive fail. Somebody gives you several $1,000s. That's a pretty good chance you should follow up with them. Again, opportunity for automation. If you're using a system, for taking your donations, most of these systems have simple things like, hey, I want to know if someone's made a gift over $500, 1,000, 250, whatever it is for your organization, because maybe that's where you, to Christine's question, maybe that's where you put the personal touch back in, right? At 50,000 donors, you can't call everybody, but you can certainly call people who make a gift over 5 or 750 or 1,000, because you can make sure that that person who thought about you and at that level, that you're on their radar and that they're on your radar. Great opportunity for a relationship there. So again, we just want to think about how we use tools for some of these really base level processes. So this is kind of outside with the organization. When we think about inside of the organization, right? Like how do we, like I think this is a report by Sage, but like it's about 60% of organizations plan to increase their digital transformation budgets. So 60% of our sector is looking at digital and saying, I see an opportunity here. We have to be here more. And the reason is, and the reality is that that's because the tools facilitate better operations within the organization because you can automate tasks, right? If you can't automate a piece of paper to fly from one side of the office to the other, but you can certainly automate a piece of data to go from one one software to another. So, there's a great reason to invest into that operationally. And again, a lot of these systems now are baking in things like little bits of AI, and this is often more, you'll see generative AI being put, hey, let's help you write a fundraising letter, or let's help you, write a thank you letter, which is fine. I don't know if you need to bake it in. I think a chat GPT or something like that would be fine in those scenarios, but there is a lot of really interesting AI being baked into these operation systems now, more around predictive. So more around like, hey, we did a look at your data and here's an interesting trend. What do you think of that? Again, you don't need to put it on autopilot, but you can absolutely lean on these tools to look for things that would just take you a day to find, right? Like it can find relationships, it can find consistent patterns, and it can surface those in a way that says, hey, here's a person who, maybe we should take a closer look at them. Are they? I saw something last week in one of these platforms, and they were just talking about some of the tools that they're putting in now for prospecting. And again, just the way that they're able to say, hey, this is a person in your database. Here's what we know about them. They've come up with some interesting ways to kind of segment external files and things like that. So it's interesting just to see, like when they pull that data, you then get a chance as the organization to look at it and say, oh yeah, why have we not asked this person for, to be part of our monthly giving program, to be part of this appeal? Like there's definite potential here. So, anytime you can look at tools, and, I can give you a couple examples. We do a lot of technology implementations for organizations. And one of the things that we really value is training. So we value onboarding the organization with their tools, not just setting it up, but we actually value making sure that the people within the organization have training, that they understand the tools, that the tools are embedded within their business processes. But we also create very detailed, very specific kind of like back-end manuals custom to their implementation. That's an arduous task for an individual. They're going through, they're taking screenshots, they're writing notes. We use an AI tool now that allows us to just kind of do a walkthrough, right? And so everything you click on, it takes a screenshot. You're narrating as you go through, just talking, and it's making the manual as you go. So what used to be a few days worth of work, it's now about an hour and a half or 2 hours worth of work. So from our perspective, same end result, significantly improved operations. So you have to look for those opportunities within your organization, because there are lots of great little tools out there, whether that's baked into your your donor systems or whether they're outside of that can really help you.
Just out of curiosity, before you get into these tools, there's a couple questions around best practices for the frequency and the amount, and there was another related question about just the amount of time it takes to do it well versus just blasting stuff out, right?
Yeah.
For the sake of blasting things out. So I think you're probably going to be now looking at some of the sort of next level tools that are available. But if an organization isn't there yet, I guess the one question is, what's the cost benefit analysis, or what's the conversation that to have with internally from like a budget size, revenue size, or capacity in terms of who's available in the organization, like to see what the leap point is to start making that transition? Because the reality is, I would assume a good number of organizations are still just using somebody, hopefully, who's sort of that spearhead, and they don't know how often to do it, and they're being like swallowed up by the amount of requests to try to keep it going. But
yeah.
How do you actually create that leap, I guess? And then there's a follow-up question for those organizations who you would say you're actually not ready for that leap yet. So like, what is that conversation?
Yeah, in terms of figuring out where you're at, I think you have to be having these conversations internally. I mean, I think, and it has to involve organizational leadership, because one of the things you need to do to be successful is to carve out a little bit of space, which means that likely um, something gets sacrificed. Right? We are going to not do something um, in order to do this thing that is going to allow us to do more in the future, right? Um, there was a great example. It wasn't the Wounded Warriors Project, or maybe it was, but anyway, an organization similar to that knew they wanted to scale, knew they wanted to make a bit of an investment, and basically had to go to the program staff and say, hey, for the next, for this coming fiscal, we're going to have to take a reduction in these things because we're investing over here. And it was it's a gamble, but the organization was committed from the top down. And what was supposed to take a year to see that investment and see that return and be able to get back to where they were and grow, I think they had it within 4.5 months or 5 months. They were able to fully restore program budgets and continue growth. But it takes that kind of everybody in mentality within the organization. It doesn't mean that you within your own space can't implement things, can't make change, can't look at your own processes for the work that you do. And if your organization, is going to put that, is not quite ready for that leap, if you don't have buy-in from the top, if people are afraid or just don't feel like they have the organizational capacity to do it, then you just have to look for small wins. You have to look for ways to sort of prove the case, and usually that's within your own, your own work, right? Is to find examples within the work that you're doing. I can use the example of what I was just saying about the manuals that we create. That was someone in our team. So we talk a lot about AI within our organization, and someone within, I sort of put it to my team to say, look for ways, look for things that you think could be done better without sacrificing the end result. So that's a great way to frame looking within your own work, looking for things that you think could be done better, could be automated, but wouldn't sacrifice the end result. And then if you're not at that leap point as an organization, then you look at it and say, okay, well, can I invest a little bit of my time to getting this thing going? And then suddenly I can, instead of consistently having, these 2-day windows where I have to do this work, I'm going to put in 3 or 4 days now to get everything set up. And then I'm going to have this, 2-day window down to a 2-hour window going forward. And then the key to that is, if you do that and you're successful, or if you're not, honestly, share it. Like, some of the best things I'm learning is from people trying and failing, people trying and succeeding, and sharing it. Because, I think one thing as a sector we could do more of is share. I think we're sometimes a little headstrong to think that, our organization is unique and therefore we can't learn from others. I think that's not necessarily true. And I think that we could learn a lot from each other's successes and failures.
Great. Okay. And so then I guess now, depending on where you're heading here, inside of your own organization, if you just sort of put those restraints or constraints aside and just think open-minded, what if we did have this opening to deploy an ecosystem? So.
Yep. Yeah. And sometimes I forget the fellow's name. I saw him at a conference a couple of years ago, was talking about some work they were doing within their organization. And the question he asked the organization was, how would you double your revenue without increasing your staff? And it was a really interesting thought exercise the organization had to go through to say, like, okay, if we can't hire more people, we can't work more hours, how do we double our revenue? And they found most of it by looking internal and saying, hey, we're not doing all we could be with the people we already have. And if we were to put our energy into that, we could bring up a lot more. And so it was really interesting to see that organization and how they went about it. Something I wanted to speak on a little bit is just, and I'm sure many organizations here know this or talking about it, but it really is the focus on recurring giving. Like Harvey McKinnon in the sector has been talking about it for as long as I've been here and much longer. But he's not wrong. There's nothing more reliable from an organization standpoint than unrestricted recurring giving. And, we have to figure out how we bring that into the doors. And honestly, one of the things I think we're missing out on is, and Kyle and I were talking about this the other day when we were doing our sound check, is there's two things happening, I think, and Kyle spoke to it earlier. There is the sort of consistent decrease in giving, or sorry, in number of people giving, while we're still seeing a slight increase in giving. That means that fewer people are giving a bit more. That has traditionally been an older demographic. And I feel like we've been talking about millennials for a long time, but we haven't really figured out what we do with them yet in terms of a giving perspective. But one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about was millennials are more primed than I think any other cohort for recurring giving, because they are subscription model people at their core. Everything that they engage with, they're significantly more they adopt subscription giving significantly more than any other cohort. And that's for a few reasons. That's because they value the personalization and the convenience of subscription models, and certainly that's been targeted and grown within the segment, sorry. But they are also now at a place where they have some financial fluidity, which as was not always the case. So I think you can look at Charity Water's monthly subscription program, this thing they call the Spring. It's bringing in 20 million annually right now, or probably more. And again, they're talking about it as a subscription model. They're really referring to it as, and this is the idea of saying maybe it's how we speak too, right? Like, how do we crack into this subscription model piece? Well, I think part of it is thinking about what are we offering, right? We're offering the ability for someone who wants to do good, someone who wants to see a change, but doesn't have the time or the capacity or the physical, they can't be the one, down rescuing puppies, or the one, down working on the, in the disaster area. Like, they can't be that person, but they still value that work. And so what we are offering them is that we are offering them a way to take what they want and see it happen. And I think if we reframe that a little bit and say, hey, but we're also going to make it as convenient, as personalized, and as valuable to you as your Netflix subscription or your Spotify subscription. It's going to be easy. It's just going to happen. You're going to sign up, but also we're going to be great stewards. We're going to come back to you consistently with information and updates so that you don't lose that good feeling. I think traditionally the sector has been afraid to touch monthly donors, right? You get people into the monthly donor group and then you're like, no one look at them, they might leave. I think the opposite is actually true. You need to make people want to stay. And that comes with, I think this sort of subscription model mentality, right? Like, what is the value that we're going to consistently provide?
Yeah, it's really good and simple too. I'd say I just want to be cognizant of time, and I'll create something here. But I've on a couple different monthly subscription programs for things like this, and I've seen some where it's like big event invites, and it's like these things have been whatever busy person, and it's like, oh wow, that'd be great, but it's X time away, or it's during the week at night, or whatever it may be. But what I don't really see a lot is just what you shared, which is like, how am I part of this, and how is my small donation? Like, what is the difference? I'm part of this team now, making a difference month to month to month, and what is the difference I'm part of making? Because it contrasts with that other previous conversation about creating community. Yes, you want your monthly donors to come out and be now part of the community physically, but then some of those monthly donors just don't really have the capacity to do that. They just want to be part of the team delivering the impact. 10:45 here. I just wanted to be cognizant of time, and you probably have quite a bit more to go. I want to offer two things. One, if anybody has questions and they need to drop off, feel free to drop them here, and Erik can either answer them during the session or we'll follow up afterward. Two, I'll make sure anybody gets a copy of the recording so you can just jump to this part and then proceed forward from here. And then Erik, I don't know how much more time you have, but maybe 5, 10, 50, I don't know what it is, but it's action items here. So I'm guessing we're doing your Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, as you can probably guess, I can yammer on about this stuff for quite a while. So feel free. I didn't want to have too much shoved in the slide deck because I also wanted to answer any questions if they came up. So, and again, not knowing where organizations are at today, I think we have a wide range of organizations. If anything that I've said helps that organization do a little bit more towards digital innovation, that's a win for me. But things that you can take away, depending on where your organization is at, is make sure that you're automating things like thank you emails, those follow-ups that stewardship that comes after someone engages with the organization. There's this enough stats out there to point to that, that second gift is really where the person becomes core to your organization. And what you do from the first time they give to moving to them towards that second gift really matters. And so certainly automate that as much as you can, look for opportunities to personalize it and just be high frequency. Wherever you can, if you're using these tools, segment your donor database as much as you can. Segmentation provides the insight, right? The more you look at your segments, the more you see opportunity for saying, hey, here's a cross segment of people that's kind of interesting. I wonder what we could do with that. Definitely digital payments. If it is hard to give to your organization digitally, look for tools out there. There's a lot of them. Fundraise Up is a good example right now of one that's kind of low cost to entry, so to speak, but you get a really high return for the sort of type of functionality that you're getting from a digital payments, mobile wallet, really kind of best in class that way. And yeah, schedule as much as you can. Again, marketing automations, whether that's social, email, those are things that you can definitely start looking at as much as possible. They just make your life a little bit easier, so you're not kind of constantly at the at the edge of the fire, so to speak. And then yeah, if anyone has any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.
So floor is open for questions. I think, it's part of this digital implementation payments, like just providing the variety of option here. We talked in an early conversation about, when you go to these walks or runs and somebody's the leader and you sign up 5-10 people coming with you. But what I've seen missing is sort of like a circular ecosystem on the event. And what I mean from this is what I don't see there is for those other 9 people who may have fundraised, may have not, maybe just joined. There's not necessarily an easy way for them to get into the organization. And I mean simple like tap payment for a donation on the spot. And then also there's not always the data collection of who those individuals are and what interests them. And then how does that then feed up? And that's where I come back into different program leaders or different people with different hats. And so I guess it's a kind of an open question for you, and anyone else can jump in and ask a question. But how do you see sort of taking that physical bodied environment and then capturing them, because without making it feel pushy or uncomfortable, because people don't want to necessarily go in and intrude on people who are already giving, you could say.
Yeah. I think the space has gotten significantly more interesting, I think, in terms of that crossover between the digital environment and the physical environment. Couple things that are interesting, from a marketing perspective, and again, this may be a little too far down the rabbit hole, but beacons, right? You can actually physically ping digital, in a physical space and deliver ads to people based on them being there. You can geo-target people attending events so that you can do really interesting things through physical representation, because we all carry these little dudes with us, which are not only our connection to the internet for the most part, but they're also the method by which most things log data about us. Right. So in terms of what your organization can do, there's some really cool stuff that can be done with mobile. In terms of things like capturing, transactions on site, there's services like TipTap, which is kind of, a tip jar, Salvation Army kettle style. You just tap and it's done. I think those are great in high volume scenarios where you can't get around and capture data. But I would argue if you're running an event where there are people there, as much as you can capture some data, that would be ideal, right? So whether that's cruising around with an iPad with a square attached and just, letting people connect, putting a couple of key details in there. We have the benefit in Canada to, if you want a tax receipt, we need your address. So that's a great reason to capture some of that detail. It's the US market's a little bit different that way, but for us, in the Canadian market, it's a great reason to be capturing that data. Say, hey, if you want to give right now, we can issue a tax receipt. Just fill out a couple of key pieces here, and we'll get that over your way. And again, you can have that iPad connected directly to your website, so it's transacting, kicking out the automated tax receipt, all that good stuff is happening, right? So there's some really good stuff you can be doing on the ground, both from a marketing and advertising perspective, as well as data capture on those transaction pieces, because and then to the segmentation and personalization, if you know that your you've brought a room full of people together who are not current donors, but they've been brought in by other people to sort of, consider the organization. Create a custom donation form, create a source code so you can identify those people separately in your database or separately in your marketing tools and speak to them specifically, because they'll need a different path, right? They're testing you out. They're, not the full commit at this point. So you have to think about, like, what do you need to speak to them about to bring them closer to the organization? And to do that, you need to just be able to identify them a little bit separately and segment them out and personalize their journey.
Thank you very much. There hasn't been any additional questions flowing through. So any last comments from you before we wrap up?
No, this was fun. Hopefully it wasn't too all over the place. I feel like sometimes, my brain goes in a lot of different directions and I can talk about a lot of things, and, not knowing specifically where a lot of organizations are at, I kind of wanted to give a bit of a broad spectrum of things you could be thinking about. So yeah, I just appreciate people coming out, and appreciate you, Kyle, for having me here today. And I know our connection actually to the CFO team is they are also our part-time CFO, so can actually speak to how great they are as an organization to work with.
Well, thanks for that bonus feedback there. But no, thank you very much for your time today. It was highly valuable. I think I even took down some notes for myself personally as well. So thank you so much for your time, and you have a lovely day. And again, every recordings will come out for everybody. Slide deck will come out as well. And I'll also ensure you have Erik's contact information should you have any specific questions for him.
Yeah,
all right.
Absolutely.
Outside of that, have a great day.
Find me on LinkedIn and track me down. Thanks, everybody.
See you.